The Galactic Council Hall was silent. 100 alien leaders from different planets sat in their seats, their faces serious. At the center of the hall, the Supreme Elder of the Council, an ancient being with silver skin and glowing eyes, stood up. He looked around the room before speaking. The secret must never be revealed. Whispers filled the hall. Some of the leaders exchanged nervous glances. They all knew what he was talking about. A young commander, Haltor of the Draxan Empire, stood up. His red-scaled face showed confusion. "Why do we fear humans so much?" he asked. "They are weaker than us. They do not have advanced technology. They do not have powerful armies. And yet we hide something from them. What is this secret?" The Supreme Elder's eyes darkened. "You ask too many questions, Commander Xaltor." Xaltor clenched his fists. He had fought many battles across the galaxy. He had seen species with incredible strength and terrifying abilities. But humans, they were nothing special. Why did the Council fear them? A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "I have the same question." Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Vectra, a brilliant scientist from the Valorian race. Her blue skin shimmered under the bright lights. "I recently found old records about humans," she continued. "But before I could read them, the files disappeared from our system. Someone erased them. Why?" The room fell into silence. The Supreme Elder sighed. "The truth about humanity is dangerous. If they ever discover their real power, the balance of the universe will change forever." Xaltor frowned. "Real power? What power?" The Supreme Elder turned and pressed a button on the table in front of him. A hologram appeared in the middle of the hall. It showed ancient battles, but something was wrong. The battles were not fought with spaceships. They were not fought with powerful alien weapons. They were fought with humans. The first scene showed a human soldier, wounded and alone, facing an entire army of alien warriors. The aliens attacked with deadly plasma weapons, but the human kept fighting. His body healed faster than normal. His reflexes became sharper. His speed increased. He took down enemies that should have been impossible to defeat. The next scene showed a group of human explorers trapped on a toxic planet. No species could survive there. The poisonous air should have killed them in seconds. But the humans adapted. Their lungs changed. Their skin resisted the poison. In just a few hours, they could breathe the deadly air as if it was nothing. The final scene showed something even more terrifying. An alien scientist experimented on a human prisoner. He injected a deadly virus into the human's body. This virus had destroyed entire civilizations before. No species had ever survived it. But the human did not die. Instead, his body changed. The virus, instead of killing him, made him stronger. Xaltor's eyes widened. "This is impossible." Vectra's hands trembled. They can adapt to anything." The Supreme Elder nodded. "Now you understand why we fear them." The room was filled with shock. The leaders had always believed that humans were weak. But now they saw the truth. Humans were not weak. They were limitless. Vectra whispered, "If they ever realize their true potential, they will surpass every species in the galaxy." The Supreme Elder's voice was grave. "That is why we must stop them before it is too late." Xaltor took a deep breath. He had always thought humans were just another race. But now he understood. Humans were different. They had something no other species had. They had the power to evolve. Suddenly, an alarm echoed through the hall. The hologram disappeared. A voice spoke through the speakers. "Alert! Unauthorized access detected. Someone is trying to retrieve the classified human files." Vectra's heart pounded. Someone else was searching for the truth. But who? The Supreme Elder's face turned dark. "Find them. Kill them if necessary. The secret must never be revealed." Far away, in a small human colony on the edge of the galaxy, a man named Jonas Carter stood outside, staring at the sky. He felt different, stronger, more aware. Something inside him was awakening, and soon the galaxy would learn the truth. Zaltor stormed out of the Galactic Council Hall, his mind racing. Everything he had been taught about humans was a lie. They weren't weak. They weren't insignificant. They were the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. His sharp claws tapped against the cold metal floor as he moved quickly through the corridors of the Grand Council spire. He needed answers, but more than that, he needed to know if humanity had already begun to discover its hidden potential. As he reached his private chambers, his communicator buzzed. The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of his second-in-command, Captain Varnock. "Commander," Varnock said, his deep voice laced with urgency. "We have a problem." Zaltor narrowed his eyes. "What is it?" "There's been a breach in the Council's secure database. Someone accessed the restricted human files." Zaltor's blood ran cold. "Who?" "We don't know yet. The signature was masked, but the data was sent to an unknown location on the Outer Rim. Someone out there now knows the truth about humanity." Zaltor clenched his fists. If this information reached the wrong hands, it could change the balance of power forever. "Trace it," he ordered. "Find out who accessed the files and where they sent them." Varnock hesitated. "Commander, that's not all. We intercepted a transmission from a human colony on the planet Epsilon 4. It's strange." Zaltor's scales tingled with unease. "Define strange." Varnock tapped a few buttons on his console, and an audio recording played through the communicator. "This is Jonas Carter of Epsilon 4, a human voice said. "If anyone is receiving this, something is happening to me. I don't know how to explain it, but I can feel it. My body is changing. I feel stronger, faster. My wounds heal in seconds. I don't need to eat or sleep as much. Something is waking up inside me. If this is happening to others, if this is what we really are, then the galaxy is not ready for us." The message ended. Silence filled the air. Zaltor's claws tightened around the communicator. He had spent years underestimating humans. He had fought alongside them, even against them, in minor skirmishes. He had seen them struggle, suffer, and survive. But he had never seen them evolve. Until now. Varnock's voice was tense. "What are your orders, Commander?" Zaltor exhaled slowly. There was only one choice. "Prepare a strike team," he said. "We're going to Epsilon 4. Epsilon 4 was a small human colony on the edge of known space, a backwater world, forgotten by most of the galaxy. But as Zaltor's warship broke through the planet's thin atmosphere, he knew this was where the future of the galaxy would be decided. From orbit, the colony looked peaceful, rows of metal buildings, small farms, and a single spaceport. But his instincts told him something was wrong. "Commander," Varnock said from the co-pilot's seat, "scanners show unusual energy signatures across the settlement. Some kind of biological anomaly." Zaltor frowned. "What does that mean?" Varnock shook his head. "We don't know, but it's centered around one life form, Jonas Carter." Zaltor's gut twisted. The ship landed outside the colony. Zaltor and his team disembarked, weapons at the ready. They moved through the settlement, scanning for any signs of hostility. Then they saw him. Jonas Carter stood in the center of the colony, surrounded by a small group of humans. He looked different. His skin shimmered slightly in the sunlight. His muscles were denser, his stance more confident. And his eyes glowed faintly. Zaltor stepped forward, towering over the human. "Jonas Carter." Jonas didn't flinch. "That's me." Zaltor studied him. There was no fear in his expression, no confusion, just certainty. "You accessed classified council data," Zaltor said. "You know what you are." Jonas nodded. "I do now." Zaltor's grip tightened on his weapon. "That information is dangerous. If others learn the truth, Jonas took a slow step forward. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble slightly. If others learn the truth, Jonas interrupted, then the galaxy will finally understand what it has tried to keep buried for so long. He glanced at the soldiers behind Zaltor. You're afraid of us. Zaltor didn't respond. Jonas exhaled. I understand now. We've been suppressed. Our evolution was slowed. But something has changed. I can feel it. My body is adapting faster than ever before. The others here, they're changing too. Zaltor glanced at the humans behind Jonas. Some looked normal, but others showed subtle signs of change. Enhanced muscle density, rapid healing, heightened senses. Jonas's voice was calm, but powerful. I don't want war, but if you try to stop what's happening to us, if you try to destroy us before we've even awakened. The air around him seemed to hum with unseen energy. You will lose. A tense silence filled the space between them. For the first time in his life, Zaltor felt true uncertainty. Jonas Carter was no longer just a human. He was something more. And the galaxy was about to find out exactly what that meant. Zaltor had always considered himself a strategist, a warrior who understood the tides of battle long before they crashed upon the shores. But as he stood before Jonas Carter, the human who had begun to change in ways no species had ever predicted, he realized he was no longer playing a game of war. This was something else entirely. Jonas's glowing eyes studied him carefully, not with hostility, but with something more dangerous, understanding. He wasn't just reacting. He was learning, adapting. Zaltor forced himself to remain calm. You don't seem surprised to see us. Jonas gave a small smile. I expected someone to come. Didn't know who. He looked at Zaltor's soldiers. Didn't expect an execution squad, though. Zaltor tensed. That's not why we're here. Jonas tilted his head. Isn't it? Zaltor felt the weight of the unspoken truth between them. He had come prepared to neutralize a threat, to eliminate a variable before it became a problem. But now, standing in front of Jonas, he wasn't sure if that was even possible. Varnok's voice crackled through the communicator. Commander, I don't like this. The energy readings are spiking again. Zaltor glanced at his wrist console. The readings were erratic, fluctuating beyond anything their scanners could explain. Whatever was happening to Jonas Carter wasn't just an anomaly. It was an evolution. You need to come with us, Zaltor said carefully. Jonas didn't move. And if I don't? Zaltor wasn't sure how to answer. For the first time in his military career, the solution wasn't clear. Force might not work. Diplomacy might not be enough. Jonas took a slow step forward. The ground beneath him vibrated slightly. I've been feeling it for weeks, he said. Something inside me, waking up. It's not just strength. It's not just speed. It's something deeper, something older. Zaltor clenched his jaw. Older. Jonas nodded. I've had dreams. Memories that aren't mine. I see things. Ancient battles, dying stars, civilizations that rose and fell long before any of us existed. And the more I change, the clearer they become. Zaltor exchanged a glance with Varnok, who looked just as unsettled as he felt. Jonas continued, his voice steady. We were never supposed to be like this. Something held us back, kept us small, but that hold is breaking. A sudden gust of wind rushed through the colony, though the air had been still moments before. Zaltor felt the pressure shift, an invisible force curling around them like a warning. Jonas exhaled slowly, then met Zaltor's gaze. I think I know why you're afraid, he said. Zaltor stiffened. We're not afraid. Jonas smiled, but it wasn't amusement. It was certainty. Yes, you are. Zaltor had faced death 100 times over. He had stood on the front lines of galactic wars, fought creatures that tore through warships like paper. He had never backed down, never doubted himself. But now, for the first time, he felt something crawling in his gut. Not fear of Jonas Carter. fear of what he was becoming. Varnak's voice interrupted the tense silence. "Commander, you need to see this." Zaltor turned, following his second-in-command's gaze. The other humans in the colony, the ones who had seemed normal just moments ago, were changing. Subtly, at first. A shimmer in their eyes, a shift in the way they stood, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Jonas glanced at them, then back at Zaltor. "It's not just me." Zaltor's breath caught in his throat. The reports had suggested that humanity had a hidden potential, something buried deep within their genetics, but no one had ever seen it manifest. Until now. He turned to Varnak, lowering his voice. "How many?" Varnak swallowed. "Our scans show at least 24 already displaying abnormal energy fluctuations. But if what Jonas is saying is true, this could spread." Zaltor faced Jonas once more. "How far does this go?" Jonas's expression darkened. "I don't know." A beat of silence. Then the alarms blared. Zaltor's communicator flared to life with a distress signal from his ship. "Commander, multiple ships inbound, fast movers, unidentified signatures. They're not ours." Jonas tensed. "You were followed." Zaltor's mind raced. He had come here believing he was the only one aware of humanity's secret. But someone else had been watching. Someone who had waited for this moment. A warning flashed across Zaltor's visor. "Incoming transmission. Encrypted." He accepted the signal, and a deep, distorted voice filled his earpiece. "You are too late, Zaltor. The awakening has begun. And now, the purge follows." The signal cut. Zaltor looked up. In the sky above, dozens of dark, jagged warships ripped through the atmosphere. Jonas narrowed his eyes. "Who are they?" Zaltor's throat tightened. "The ones who don't want you to exist." Jonas's fists clenched, energy crackling faintly around his fingertips. "Then let's show them how wrong they were." The sky burned as the warships descended, their jagged silhouettes blotting out the stars. Zaltor had seen planetary invasions before, brutal, efficient, merciless. But this time was different. This wasn't a war over resources, territory, or politics. This was an extermination. The hidden enemy had waited, watching humanity's slow evolution from the shadows. Now that the awakening had begun, they had decided to strike before it was too late. Jonas Carter stood at the center of it all, his body vibrating with barely contained energy. Around him, the colony's inhabitants had begun to change. It was no longer just flashes of power or glimpses of something greater. It was real, tangible. Strength, speed, perception. Everything was accelerating at an alarming rate, but there was no time to understand it. Zaltor turned to his second-in-command. "Varnak, status report." Varnak's voice was tight with urgency. "Enemy fleet composition. 38 capital ships, over 100 smaller attack crafts. They're deploying ground units, high-energy signatures, possibly mechanized infantry." Zaltor clenched his jaw. "And our reinforcements?" Varnak hesitated. "None, sir." Silence. Jonas exhaled, eyes locked onto the incoming warships. "Then we fight." Zaltor studied the human's face. There was no fear, only a quiet certainty. "You don't understand," Zaltor said, voice low. "This is not a battle we can win. These are the enforcers of the Silent Order. When they arrive, entire civilizations vanish." Jonas tilted his head. "Then why haven't they attacked yet?" Zaltor frowned. "That was a good question." The Order never hesitated. They struck with overwhelming force, leaving nothing behind. But now, they hovered above, waiting. A deep hum filled the air as something massive descended from the lead warship. A long, needle-like structure detached, glowing with ominous red energy. It planted itself into the ground just outside the colony with a deafening boom. The moment it struck, the air shifted. A wave of energy rippled outward, making Zaltor's skin crawl. Jonas winced but held his ground. Then a voice, deep, resonant, and emotionless, echoed from the structure. The anomaly will step forward. A deathly silence fell over the colony. The Order wasn't here to wipe them all out. Not yet. They wanted Jonas. Jonas exhaled slowly. They mean me. Zoltor grabbed his shoulder. If you go, you die. Jonas met his gaze. If I don't, they'll kill everyone here. A choice no warrior should ever have to make. Before Zoltor could argue further, a new voice spoke. This one from the gathered colonists. No. Both Jonas and Zoltor turned. It was a woman, one of the workers from the colony, her eyes glowing faintly. Another voice joined. We stand together. Then another. And another. Zoltor's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just a single anomaly anymore. The awakening was no longer just Jonas Carter's burden. It was spreading through all of them. The Silent Order must have realized it too, because the deep, emotionless voice returned. Non-compliance will result in planetary cleansing. Jonas cracked his knuckles, energy arsing between his fingers. You're going to have to try. And then the sky erupted. The warships opened fire, beams of red plasma tearing toward the colony. But before they could land, before the destruction could begin, something impossible happened. Jonas raised his hand, and the world stopped. The plasma bolts, moments away from incinerating the colony, froze midair. The air itself seemed to shudder as an invisible force rippled outward from Jonas. Then, without warning, the energy reversed. The plasma bolts snapped back, turning against their source, slamming into the attacking warships with devastating force. Explosions bloomed across the sky as the first wave of ships was torn apart by their own weapons. The colonists gasped, staring at Jonas in awe. Even he looked shocked by what he had just done. Zoltor's mind raced. This wasn't just strength. This wasn't just speed. This was control over forces no species had ever manipulated before. Jonas turned to him, his voice calm but firm. Get everyone underground. Now. Zoltor hesitated. And you? Jonas clenched his fists. I'm going to end this. Above them, the remaining warships reoriented. The Order had underestimated their target, but they would not make that mistake again. A deep, guttural sound filled the air. Not a voice. Not a transmission. A command. The ground shook as something massive descended from the lead warship, a towering construct, shifting and writhing as it took shape. Metal and energy fused together, forming a colossal figure, faceless yet filled with an overwhelming presence. The executioner of the Silent Order had arrived. Jonas exhaled. The glow in his eyes intensified. The air crackled around him, bending, shifting. He looked up at the towering figure, and then he smiled. Let's see what you've got. The battlefield was silent. Not the quiet of peace, but the kind of silence that comes before the storm, the deep breath before chaos. Jonas stood at the center of it all, his body humming with energy he barely understood. The colonists behind him had taken shelter underground, and Zoltor stood at the entrance, torn between duty and the impossible truth before him. The executioner of the Silent Order had fully formed now, towering over the battlefield like a nightmare given shape. It was neither machine nor living being. Something in between, its metallic body pulsing with dark energy. Its presence alone was suffocating, pressing against reality itself. Then, without warning, it moved. Faster than something its size should be capable of. It lunged, its massive arms sweeping toward Jonas with the force of a collapsing star. Jonas didn't dodge. Instead, he raised his hand. The air around him twisted, and for the briefest moment, time itself seemed to hesitate. Then, impossibly, the executioner's attack stopped mid-swing, frozen inches away from Jonas' face. Zoltor's breath caught. That's not possible. Jonas exhaled, and with a mere flick of his wrist, sent the executioner flying backward. The towering entity crashed into the ground, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The Silent Order's warships began to reposition. Tactical adjustments. This wasn't a simple extermination anymore. This was something they hadn't prepared for. Jonas clenched his fists. He could feel it now. The hum of something greater, something ancient buried deep within his very being. It wasn't just strength. It wasn't just speed. It was understanding. The universe itself responded to him. The executioner rose again, unfazed by its sudden defeat. This time, its body shifted, reshaping into something even more terrifying. Blades of dark energy forming along its arms, its form flickering as if phasing between dimensions. It spoke, not in words, but in pure force, pressing its will into the minds of those present. You were not meant to awaken. Jonas smirked. Guess I didn't get the memo. The executioner lunged again, but this time, Jonas met it halfway. The moment they clashed, the battlefield erupted. Energy surged outward, warping the very fabric of space. Jonas moved like a blur, weaving between attacks with an ease that defied logic. Every strike from the executioner that should have crushed him simply missed, as if the universe itself refused to let him be harmed. Then, Jonas struck back. He didn't punch, didn't kick. He simply reached out. The executioner froze mid-motion, and for the first time, something flickered in its dark presence. Uncertainty. Jonas tilted his head. You're scared. The air around them crackled. The warships above hesitated, as if awaiting new orders. Jonas narrowed his eyes, and then, without a single word, he pulled. The executioner let out a sound. Deep, guttural, ancient. It wasn't pain. It was recognition. Its body began to unravel, threads of energy pulling away, dissolving into the air. Jonas wasn't just fighting it. He was undoing it. And then it was gone. Silence. The warships above remained still. Then, as one, they began to retreat. The Silent Order had never been defeated before. They had never encountered anything they couldn't destroy. Until now. Jonas exhaled and turned toward Zaltor. You okay? Zaltor shook his head in disbelief. What are you? Jonas looked at his hands, flexing his fingers as the energy inside him settled. He wasn't sure how to answer that. But something told him this was only the beginning. The aftermath of the battle lingered in the air like a storm that had passed but left destruction in its wake. The Silent Order had withdrawn, their warships disappearing into the void, yet the echoes of their defeat remained. Jonas stood in the middle of the battlefield, his breath steady but his mind racing. He had done something impossible, something even he didn't fully understand. The executioner had been a force of destruction beyond mortal comprehension, and yet Jonas had unmade it. Zaltor approached cautiously. There was something different in his eyes now. Fear, awe. Jonas couldn't tell. That wasn't just power, Zaltor said, his voice quieter than usual. That was something else. Jonas exhaled, shaking his head. I don't know what it was. It just happened. The colonists emerged from their underground shelter, their faces a mix of disbelief and relief. Murmurs spread through the crowd. They had expected annihilation, but instead, they had witnessed something that defied all logic. A woman stepped forward, her expression unreadable. She was older, her face marked by the hardships of colonist life. What are you, Jonas? He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. Because the truth was, he didn't know. Before he could respond, the sky above shimmered. Jonas and Zaltor turned their heads upward. The Silent Order's warships had fled, but something else was coming. A ripple in space, a distortion in reality itself. And then, they arrived. Not in ships, not with weapons. They simply appeared. Tall, luminous beings, their forms shifting like liquid light. Their presence was overwhelming, not oppressive, not cruel, but vast. As if the fabric of the universe itself had taken shape before them. The crowd instinctively backed away. Even Zaltor, a warrior who had faced horrors across the galaxy, took a step back. Jonas, however, felt something different. Not fear, not awe. Recognition. One of the beings turned its gaze toward him. No words were spoken, yet Jonas felt them echo in his mind. It has begun. The air crackled. Energy rippled outward. The very stars seemed to dim. Jonas clenched his fists. Who are you? The being tilted its head. The question is not who we are. The question is, who are you? Jonas' heart pounded. He didn't understand what was happening, but deep down, he felt it. A truth buried within him. A secret that had been waiting to be uncovered. The being raised a hand and suddenly, memories flooded his mind. Visions of civilizations long gone. Wars fought in the shadows of dying stars. A time when humanity was not weak, not outmatched, but something greater. Jonas gasped, stumbling back. The being lowered its hand. The silent order feared you, but they do not understand. Zoltor found his voice. Understand what? The being's form pulsed. That humanity was never meant to be conquered. You were meant to awaken. Jonas' breath caught. He looked down at his hands, the energy still lingering within them. This wasn't just power. This wasn't just some fluke. This was a part of something bigger. The luminous being stepped forward. They will return. And next time, they will not run. They will erase you before you can realize the full extent of what you are. Jonas met its gaze. Then I need to know everything. The being studied him for a long moment. Then finally, it spoke once more. Then come. The space around them bent, the universe folding inward. And Jonas stepped forward, into the unknown. The universe unraveled around Jonas. For a moment, there was no time, no space, only a vast, infinite expanse stretching beyond comprehension. It wasn't emptiness, nor was it darkness. It was potential, raw and unshaped, as if the very fabric of existence had been stripped to its core. Then, in an instant, reality snapped back into place. Jonas found himself standing on solid ground, but it was like no surface he had ever known. It shimmered beneath his feet, shifting between metallic and organic, both alive and lifeless. The luminous beings stood before him, their forms pulsing with a strange rhythm, like the heartbeat of the universe itself. You are ready to see, one of them said, its voice not heard but felt, resonating in the deepest parts of his mind. Jonas exhaled, steadying himself. Then show me. The space around him shifted, and then he saw. Memories that were not his own flooded his mind. Visions of humanity, not as the fragile species it was now, but as something else, something far greater, a time before recorded history, before humanity had forgotten. They had not been weak. They had not been primitive. They had been gods. Not in the sense of divinity, but in sheer ability. The laws of physics had not bound them as they did now. They had once walked among the stars, not in metal ships, but by bending reality itself to their will. But something had happened. A great war, a catastrophe beyond comprehension. An enemy, one so powerful, so overwhelming, that humanity had been forced to do the unthinkable. They had sealed themselves away, not physically, not by hiding, but by forgetting. Jonas staggered back, gasping as the visions faded. We did this to ourselves. The beings nodded. To protect what remained. He shook his head, trying to process it all. But why? If we were so powerful, why didn't we fight? Because the enemy was not of this universe. Jonas' breath caught. The silent order had feared him. The executioner had recognized him. But they were not the true enemy. They were merely enforcers of a greater force, one that had nearly destroyed humanity once before. And now, humanity was waking up. Jonas clenched his fists. Then that means they're coming back. The luminous beings remained silent. Jonas looked up at them, his heart pounding. Can I stop it? Only if you remember what you were. The words echoed in his mind. Jonas knew what had to be done. No more running. No more hiding. It was time for humanity to awaken. And this time, they would not forget.